Hello, and welcome to another Precision Flyer Repairs video. Thanks for joining me today. This video is on an American Flyer by Gilbert 302 Atlantic. You might ask, wow, why a video dedicated to a lowly 302? Well, it's one that a customer gave to me, which has an interesting story of customization and enhancement or repair, as well as I think makes a good platform to discuss a few points that are applicable to other engines. So if you're really well versed at repairing American Flyer, this video may not be terribly enlightening, but if you're someone finding your way through that process, you might find some of this interesting and helpful for you to understand them better. This particular 302 is one that has been previously customized for my customer, and he liked everything about the way it turned out in terms of its appearance, but wasn't happy with the way it ran. So gave it to me and asked, please get this to run well, and while you're at it, change out the Gilbert electromechanical reverse unit and replace it with an electronic Dallee number 400 universal unit. So I did that and some other things which did now have it running well. I'll produce a video showing it run on the layout so as to show a few things about it with a Dallee 400. In terms of the Dallee 400 installation, there are also pictures of the installation of that in the tender as a work in process, so you can see it with the shell removed and the different steps taken along the way to make that change. But this actually serves as a platform for a number of things that are generally interesting, including something unique, if you will, about the crosshead guide on 302s and headlight lamps or bulbs in general, as well as the quartering of steam engines, which are topics that I'll get to, but first give a little more description of how this was customized. You can tell it was repainted and renumbered, nice crisp lettering. There's a Pennsylvania Railroad herald instead of a Reading lines. There's handrails on it. In the back, if you could see, there are red jewels, and in the front there are green jewels. Very interesting here. You can see the Delta style die-cast trailing truck with the appropriate drawbar added. In there you can see a cloth sheathed 4-wire harness, as well as the cloth sheathed 2-wire harness now that I've added. When you put a Dallee unit in, you run 4 wires to the cab, 2 to each of the field posts, and 1 to each of the armature brushes. But you then also have to wire directly and separately from the reverse unit the smoke unit and the headlight. That actually helps enhance the performance of the smoke unit and the headlight by having the fact that it's direct wired, not in contact with anything else in the engine. And you'll see that, I think, when you watch the video of it on the layout. The things that were troubling this engine really stemmed primarily from the tender. The tender had its trucks changed out to knuckle trucks, and it was sparking and stalling and running erratically, which you might assume is something to do with the old-fashioned reverse unit, but actually the problem was that the rivets used to hold the new trucks were not completely set, and so I reset those so as to have the trucks better adjusted to the chassis and not flop around so much. And what was happening with the rivets not set enough is this truck in particular was shorting out to the chassis. The shoulder bushing alone was not enough to keep this isolated or insulated from the chassis plate. And also the wheels were sparking a great deal because they weren't gauged properly. They were dirty, and as you can see have now been polished, and the leaf springs also were a bit oxidized and now have been polished. So with that, the correction made to the truck rivets and the wheel gauging and wheel polishing and spring shininess, all making now for better connectivity and continuity. The engine's running quite nicely. It is important with these engines like the Atlantic that don't have a contact foot off their side frame to be especially sure about the gauging and cleanliness of the wheels, and likewise your tracks. So that pretty much covers this particular 302 as a customized unit, and now as a repaired one made to run as well as it looks. To the points of general interest, first about 302s, as you can see, this 302 has a screw back here where the crosshead guide is attached to the boiler. This is the later design that Gilbert came up with. There's an earlier design, and I'm using the Greenberg's Guide to American Flyer, Volume 1, and in there, I'll try to get it so that the page isn't all glary. You can see this upper picture here is the crosshead guide of the earliest design. It's secured only to the cylinders here and not to the boiler, as it is in the two that are on my workbench. Down here, of course, you can see the later single piece plastic bodied, but while they were making the nice 4-part die cast Atlantics, the earlier ones had this kind of vulnerable crosshead guide design, cantilevered out, just attached to the steam chest, and later they realized they could do better than that and added a screw here to support it directly to the boiler. It's also got tabs that are inserted to the steam chest here. So when you're looking for a 302, one of the things that I like to look for is a little extra robustness that's designed in this way on the latter models. Another thing that comes up quite a bit, I find a lot of 1447 light bulbs in engines. And they're 18-volt bulbs. They don't burn as brightly as 14-volt 1449s, which may be something you want to do in a plastic shell engine that you're concerned about getting hot and potentially harming the plastic shell, although that's really not that common unless you're running the engines at pretty high voltages, and then it might be that your engine needs some tuning if it's not running very well, and or you're just pulling too many cars with it. But that's sometimes a safeguard to use. In these metal die-cast bodied engines, though, I like the 1449, which is a 14-volt bulb, and they burn a little brighter, and so I think you get a nicer headlight effect from them. And with a metal body, you don't have to worry about heat causing any harm. One of the reasons I think I find 1447s prevalently in the engines, and that's this one, instead of the 1449, which is this one, is because the 1449 is very prevalently found in the wrong size. Now, come on, a 1449 is a 14-volt bulb, is a 14-volt bulb. Well, actually, there are two sizes of bulbs. One is called US spec, and one is called international spec. And I hope that this is coming through on the camera okay. The one on the right is the international spec, and the body of it, you can see, is taller than the body of a United States spec 1449. So while they're the same bulb in terms of part number and voltage rating, they're not in terms of physical dimension. And the international spec 1449 can be too tall to fit in behind the smoke box cover of several American Flyer steam engines. So I'd say do yourself a favor and look for United States spec 1449s. Put them in as many engines as you're comfortable with doing that, and you'll get a little brighter headlight effect from them while they're running. Another thing that I find curious as different steam engines come through the workshop is the quartering that was applied to their wheels. This one, you can see the builder quartered in what I call aft quartering or quartering behind or quartering in arrears, in that the crank pivots are at 3 o'clock when the right side crank pivots are at 6 o'clock. Now, it's interesting because that works, but most, actually all, of my quartering jigs and tools are designed such that when on the left side the crank pivots are at 9 o'clock, not 3 o'clock, the crank pivots on the right side are in their 6 o'clock position. Now, Thomas Barker has a couple of editions of his book on American Flyer trains. Tom's very knowledgeable about this, obviously, and a great guy, and I recommend his books. I have several editions of them, but he uses in them this diagram for quartering a steam engine. And I think it's a little open to interpretation, and that could explain why we have some where on the right side at 6 o'clock, some quarter their left sides to 3 o'clock, and some quarter their left sides to 9 o'clock. I like the 6 o'clock on the right side and 9 o'clock on the left side. And I think that's what he intended, because here's a potential explanation for why. This diagram shows the view of the steam engine from the right side with the crank pivots at the 6 o'clock position. So let's take this one, for example, and do that. Okay, this is the right side, and as he indicates on this diagram, the cab end is always to your left. Okay, this is the right side of this engine with the cab to the left. We can turn this one around to be consistent and play along. This one is also now the right side, the cab to the left. Both have their crank or connecting rod bolts or pivots at 6 o'clock. Now, if you look at the left side of an engine, this is the left side, or brakeman's side, or fireman's side, I should say. And you notice, okay, the cab is not on the left. This says the left side with the cab end on the left. Well, it's virtually impossible to look at the left side of an engine and have the cab end not be on the right. It will never be on the left. So, okay. And I think people do that. They turn it around, they look at the left side, and they say, well, what's the orientation then of the connecting rod bolts? Oh, toward the right. Oh, okay. Here we have the left side of the engine and the connecting rods toward the right. But really, what you should be doing, I think, is this is the right side, as shown up here in the diagram, with the cab on the left side, and put on your X-ray glasses so that you look through the right side to the left side, and the cab end remains that way on the left side. What is the orientation of your connecting rod bolts in that case? And sure enough, if you look, they're in the forward or opposite end of the cab end position. This is the cab end. Here are the connecting bolts at the opposite orientation than the cab end of the boiler. In other words, these connecting rod points are actually out pointing closer to the cowcatcher than they are the cab end. Whereas on this one, where they were quartered 180 degrees differently, the connecting rod pivots or bolts are actually toward the cab end. And while either approach works, I think it's a little more universal, so that it might be a little easier for more people to service their trains with the tools that have been produced for quartering. If you look at it this way, here's the right side with the cab on the left. I'm going to put on my X-ray glasses and look through to the left side. The cab that way remains on the left, and which then orientation do my connecting bolts have relative to the cab end. They are facing away from the cab end, and sure enough, when at 9 o'clock on the left, that's where they end up. So just a quick orientation to the quartering approach. Again, it doesn't really matter in terms of the functioning. Either work. It's just which one you personally prefer to have and to execute your engines with. So without any more to say really about this, than look for the video that I'm going to make on this one that was customized and got the Dallee 400 put in it, as well as some pictures on my website explaining that work in progress. I'd say until we meet again, be well, have fun running your trains, and if you'd like more information about this 302's upgrade to a Dallee 400, please visit my website, as well as find information there on other engines that I've worked on and services that I can provide to you. Thank you.